This week's Parsha is Parsha Teitzei, which is the 49th Parsha or Torah portion of the Torah and the 6th portion in the book of Devarim, which is the 5th and final book of the 5 books of Moses. And this week's Parsha, the sort of major overarching theme is our responsibility for one another, or specifically our responsibility to other Jews. What's interesting about this week's Parsha is we receive 74 out of the 613 total commandments of the Torah. So really a sizable chunk of all of the commandments are in this week's Parsha. And a lot of them have to do with our relationship with our brethren and how to properly treat them. So I sort of have a list here of some of the ones that were listed in the Parsha that show how we have to be responsible and how we have to treat those who we interact with, and I thought it'd be interesting to go through them, and at the end I'll sort of tie it all together. So the first one that comes up is returning lost objects, and it's interesting because the Torah gives the example of an ox. If you see an ox, a lost ox, that you have to return it. But I did an entire video about oxen and what we can learn from them in the Torah, and so I'll leave that video linked below. But essentially, whenever we see a lost object of someone, we have to try and return it to them, because that's something of value to them. That's something that would be causing them harm not to have. And so it's important. We can't just see a lost object and keep it for ourselves, or see a lost object and just say, oh, that's lost, somebody will find it. We have to try and make an effort to return it to the owner. Continuing on, we get the commandment to build a fence around our roof. So this one's quite interesting. Essentially, if you sort of have a flat roof and you might be hanging out on your roof, you have to build a fence around it so that if people are hanging out up there, they won't accidentally fall off your roof and hurt themselves or worse. And so it becomes sort of this commandment, this law, that we need to build fences around our roof. Nowadays, that usually tends to apply to swimming pools or sort of other areas of danger as well for people, that we have to build these fences. And it applies not just to fences, but in other ways as well. When we could be in a situation where we could prevent danger or prevent somebody from injury, we have to do something about it. We can't stand idly by. We can't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person and other sort of these Jewish concepts. We have to do what we can to prevent other people from injury. The next one is, if a man falsely accuses his wife of adultery because he doesn't like her, he's been married to her, he hates her now, he decides he wants to get rid of her, he has to find some grounds to get rid of her on, and so he decides that he's going to say that she committed adultery, that way he can divorce her. And the court takes this case on, and they see that the man is lying and that he sort of tried to say these harmful things about his wife. Then the man gets punished and he can't divorce her because he brought these baseless claims to the court. The next one is, if you find an escaped slave in your city. So not somebody from the Jewish people, not somebody from your nation, but somebody from a neighboring village, a neighboring country, and they end up in your land, in your city, and they're looking for a place to live. You can't return them to their slave owner. You can't send them away. You can't banish them. You have to let them in and invite them to live with you, and you have to not make them feel badly about their past or about their present. You have to do what you can to support them. The next one is that when it comes to lending money to Jewish people, you cannot charge interest. You can't charge interest to other Jews. You have to do it from the kindness of your heart to truly help your sort of brothers and sisters. You have to do what you can, and you can't be doing it to gain financial benefit. The next one sort of continues in the theme, which is that if you are working in your field, if you are a farmer, if you have produce, and let's say you're gathering grapes or fruit or whatever it happens to be, and some falls behind or they're small bunches, you have to leave it for poor people. You shouldn't be so greedy to take every last bit. You have to be kind in your heart and share with those who are less fortunate than you. The next one that comes up is if sort of, again, relating to loans, but let's say that this is a very poor person who you have lended money to, and let's say they give you something like their pillow or their blanket as sort of security in case they can't pay, that you would be able to keep their pillow or blanket. The lender, the person who now has this poor man's pillow and blanket, needs to return that pillow and blanket every evening in exchange for some other object. You can't put somebody who is poor into such discomfort as security on your loan. You have to still be kind to them and still return what they need, because this is something essential to them and something that would make their lives very uncomfortable, and that's not the point here. Again, continuing with this theme, we have a commandment to pay our workers before the day is over. So if you have a day worker, somebody who's working for you for that day, you shouldn't sort of, get an invoice and pay it a long time from now. You should be very prompt and punctual in your payment, because that's somebody's livelihood. They did the service for you, and now you owe them money. So we have to pay promptly. The next one comes from, if you have two brothers and one of them dies and leaves his wife childless, the other brother, the surviving brother, is supposed to marry his deceased brother's wife, and their children should continue sort of the name of the deceased brother. Essentially, that the brother is supposed to take care of his deceased brother's wife. He's supposed to support her. He's supposed to take care of her. And that is sort of a biblical obligation. And there's a whole process that if he decides that he doesn't want to do it or that he can't do it, there's a whole process that he has to go through with the wife of his brother, with his sister-in-law, in order to say that, he doesn't want to carry on the name of his brother. He doesn't want to take on this obligation. And it's maybe seen for as less favorably, at least in the biblical times. Nowadays, I think it's probably the preferred option, but in biblical times, it was preferred that the brother should take on his deceased brother's name. And what it really all boils down to, the very last paragraph of the Parsha, is the commandment to remember Amalek. So they were a nation who attacked the Jewish people when they were leaving Egypt. They were at a very weak and vulnerable spot. And the way Amalek attacked was they attacked from the rear. So if you think about a nation, who's going to be behind when you're traveling? It's going to be the children. It's going to be the older people. It's going to be the weak people, the sick people, the people who maybe have injuries. Those people are going to be at the back. It's not the strongest people who are the warriors, who are up front and strong and really vital and full of life, who are charging ahead. The people at the back are going to be the most vulnerable people in the population. And so for Amalek to attack from the back shows that they didn't have mercy and they didn't have kindness, and they really weren't looking out for other people or being kind. There's sort of ways to do war that are more humane, and there are ways to do war that are less humane, and this was really a less humane option. And I think that it's not a coincidence that this is the last paragraph after we receive all of these commandments about how to care for our brother and how to be kind, how to have proper conduct and responsibility for other people. It's no coincidence that these two things go together, because I think what it's sort of saying is that we don't want to be like Amalek. We don't want to sort of go down to that level. And these commandments and these mitzvahs are a way to prevent ourselves from seeking to that level. If we pay our workers on time, and if we are kind to slaves and to poor people, and if we really take all of those things to heart, then we're not going to be like Amalek. We're going to be like the Jewish people are meant to be. And so I hope that each of you can sort of take something away from this week's Parsha about how to better treat other people. And I hope you all have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom.